Just read an interesting article in The Nation by an author called Dan Sinekin, an English professor who is about to publish a book called Big Fiction, a study of corporate publishing and the emergence of the big five companies that run international publishing. And this article addressed the perennial subject of the death of literary fiction, charting its history, where the term came from, its emergence in the late 70s, early 80s, its widespread acceptance in the industry, its brief heyday as literary fiction authors like Norman Mailer and Philip Roth were as commercially viable as more popular types of fiction, science fiction, crime, you name it. And then it's declined since then, due in no small part to the interference of these sort of corporate mega publishers. It really interested me. The subject always interests me. One of the reasons it's interesting is everyone has a different definition of what literary fiction is. You might think it's one thing, I might think it's another. I think broadly the disagreement originates between a difference between what a consumer thinks literary fiction is and what the commercial, whether it's the publisher or the bookshop, thinks literary fiction is. A consumer of literary fiction tends to use the term in a qualitative way. Literary fiction is fiction that's just sort of better. It might be more aesthetically ambitious than most of what else is widely available. It might have a certain degree of difficulty. Its prose line, its sentence structure might not be governed solely by the principle of clarity. Whereas the commercial definition of what literary fiction has strayed from that over the years. Speaking from experience working in department bookshops, literary fiction tended to be what didn't comfortably fit anywhere else. It couldn't be described as science fiction. It couldn't be described as romance. It wasn't a board game. And it wasn't one of those nice little packets of heritage fudge a customer could buy on the way out. So it's looking like it's probably literary fiction. I think related to that, and more recently, literary fiction has come to mean a book that wears its issues on its sleeve, that you can tell what the current era issue this book is about from 50 yards. And the combination of those two things guarantees that the literary fiction shelf in your average Waterstones is the shelf least worth visiting. It will have the lowest hit rate of any other section in the shop, including the fudge. There will be some gems in there somewhere, but that they will be completely drowned out by a wave of slush, books that are the worst books being written and published today. And they're not the worst books because they are infernally clever, too clever for their own good, cryptic, obscure, full of purple prose, pretentious, overreaching, blah, blah, blah. Those books don't get published anymore. No major publisher would bother with a book that has any degree of difficulty. They simply aren't viable. In their place is just watery slush. Books that forego genre conventions but also don't provide any artistic ambition either. They solely talk about today, or more usually yesterday's issues, in a prose style that a reasonably talented raven could keep up with. And what's interesting about this shift is the issue of snobbery. It's been very effectively argued that people who want literary fiction are snobs, and therefore take a dim view of anything commercial or popular. By which I mean a consumer wanting something singular and good is called a snob by the very people who are trying to sell them lots of something crap. I've seen with my own eyes at book events a phenomenally successful author, a romance author, being interviewed, not by me, but just in my capacity as a bookshop stooge in a former job. I've seen a phenomenally successful author say on camera, in the same breath, just how fabulously wealthy the romance genre has made her and how underappreciated and neglected the genre is, which I found really interesting because it shows how successful that sort of counter snobbery has been. Despite the fact that nobody publishes difficult, ambitious books, there is still a kind of moral panic about their existence. The people have to very vocally insist that they have no pretentious tastes when it comes to reading, that the best and only reading level is beginner, and that's the way it should always be. Now, it's not to say that clever books aren't being written. Any reader of genre fiction like science fiction or fantasy will tell you that people with big ideas tend to migrate to those genres because there isn't so much of a snobbery about big ideas and challenging prose, and God forbid even something that's like a bit difficult in those genres. Unfortunately, the dross follows them, so you get middlebrow literary fiction writers like Margaret Atwood or Ian McEwan thinking they're going to have some kind of busman's holiday by, writing a science fiction novel, but because they haven't taken any time to familiarize themselves with the genre conventions or the history, they don't even know how derivative they're being with their gimmickified social commentary or whatever it is. But to end this quick ranty video on a positive note, I can make a recent recommendation of a book that has successfully done that. Alice Thompson has just written a book called Chimera. It's published by Salt Publishing. Now, Alice Thompson is an author who would probably usually be on the literary fiction shelf. This is pure science fiction, but she brings to it, it's a story of AI. I won't go much further than that because I'll end up spoiling the plot. But I'm going to be reviewing this book in the Glasgow Review of Books shortly. So once it comes out, I'll post it in the link to this video, and I'll talk about it on the channel. I loved the book. I think it was brilliant. But yes, to science fiction, Alice Thompson brings some of the best parts of literary fiction sensibilities, a frame of reference, literary aspirations, and a literary kind of pace and tone. It's a really great melding of old and new, of classical and futurological. So check that out if you like. It's called Chimera. And why don't we end with a question? What does literary fiction mean to you, and do you think it's dead?